There is no health without mental health. Join Brian Green for Mental Wealth on 103.2 Dublin City FM each Tuesday at 12:30pm. Your mental health awareness station on 103.2 Dublin City FM with Brian Green.
You're very welcome to Mental Wealth with myself, Brian Green, and our production team of Pia Einecker, Joe McBride and Margaret McHugh. On today's programme, Pia will be going to UCD and talking with Joe Lavelle of the Feeling Better project. Just before that, some news in Mental Health Radio. We welcome on air a complimentary service which is on stream on the internet called Peace Within Radio. Peace Within Radio is operated by Kelly Martin, who you remember we interviewed here on Mental Wealth in the past. And yesterday, April 1st, she launched Peace Within Radio at peacewithinradio.com, and it's broadcasting online all over the world with programmes about mental health and well-being, so worth checking out on social media channels. Today, as I said, Pia last week went to UCD. The Feeling Better project is a series of talks at UCD about mental health. We'll have information about an upcoming talk they have on April 24th at the end of the programme. But first, let's get to UCD, and Pia is talking with Joe Lavelle, researcher and psychologist with UCD, and we're talking about our thoughts, and we're going to find out about the pink elephant. Over to Pia.
So I'm here with Joseph Lavelle, a researcher and psychologist. And my first question would be, how did you first come up with the idea for the Feeling Better project?
I suppose it was, having, been a student here at, UCD for a couple of years now, and I suppose sort of seeing that sort of real need for something like this here on campus. We know that there's a lot of demand on, I suppose, support services here for students, and we sort of felt like that there was maybe something we could bring, sort of from our own research, from our own sort of experience, our own area of interest, acceptance and commitment therapy, and that maybe there was something that we could offer that would help, but does I suppose mental health concerns, or not even something even as strong as that, but it's just generally speaking, to help people, I suppose, be a bit more connected about what's important to them in life, to be a bit kinder to themselves. Like, you don't need to have any specific difficulty to need to be a little bit kinder to yourself. We're all quite critical, and even tonight was, I suppose, about that, and being a bit, I suppose, gentler and noticing the sort of unhelpful thoughts, unhelpful ways of thinking. We thought that that's something we could bring out to the student population and beyond, and I think that's kind of where it was born out of then. Yeah.
You also mentioned the pink elephant metaphor. And also, it's in the name of the program.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you if you could explain the metaphor and why you've chosen it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose the context, would be helpful. So when I talk about the pink elephant, I suppose it's kind of a experiential exercise that I do sometimes. And I suppose what I'd ask someone to do in that is to think about anything they like, anything in the world that they want at this moment in time, anything at all except a pink elephant. You mustn't think of a pink elephant. Under no circumstances think about a pink elephant wearing sunglasses, and definitely don't think about a pink elephant, a herd of pink elephants wearing sunglasses. And what most people will find when they're asked to do that is all they can think about is a pink elephant. And that's, when it's a pink elephant, it's not really an issue. But if it's a difficult thought, like I'm stupid, I'm no good, I'm a terrible person, and you're trying to not think that thought, what happens is it pops up more and more and more. And I suppose that's kind of where, I suppose, the title of the talk came from. I suppose a lot of tonight then was about breaking free when you get into a struggle like that you're trying to push down or push away a thought, and it just keeps popping up right back in your face. But also noticing different ways that we can get I suppose, tangled up in our thoughts, and I suppose maybe unhelpful things sometimes our mind does when we're maybe doing something that involves something that's a bit uncomfortable, or, doing something that involves leaving that safe, nice warmth to the comfort zone. Yeah.
So why do you think these thoughts keep popping up although they're unhealthy for us? Because like you said, when it's the pink elephant or the thought I'm stupid, if you don't want to think about it, you think even more about it. Why do you think does something like that happen to us? Or why do you think the human has evolved a system like that?
Yeah. I suppose that, to sort of follow that sort of evolved, it is something that we've evolved to do over thousands and thousands and thousands of years. I kind of mentioned in the workshop that, our ancestors millions of years ago, if you had the thought that the rustle in the bush over there was a tiger or a dinosaur, well, that's not scientifically accurate, but, something that was going to be a big danger to you, you were probably more likely to survive over the guy who's thinking, oh, there's a rustle in the bush, I'll go over and have a look. So then the guy who has that sort of anxious thought, he sticks around, and, that continues. The other guy, things probably didn't work out so well for him, but it's something then that has kept people safe over the millennia, and it worked really well in those times. It kept you safe, it kept you living. Nowadays, our saber-toothed tiger is that presentation, or that, difficult conversation we need to have with a loved one. So we get these thoughts popping up and up and up. So whereas once upon a time it was helpful and our mind was trained and developed to do that, now sometimes it's not so helpful. And it's a product of that sort of evolution, but it can create problems for us, as we kind of talk about.
Yeah, and I also wanted to ask you about the pattern of thinking you mentioned in the workshop as well. So could you explain to us the pattern of thinking associated with human behavior?
Yeah. I suppose some of the patterns of thinking that I would talk about, one of them that I talk about is reason giving. So when we as people start to move out of the comfort zone, difficult, anxiety will pop up, different difficult feelings, and the mind will immediately kick in then. And it's sort of, I use the metaphor of a reason-giving machine, and he'll come up with reason after reason why we shouldn't do that thing, even though it is something that's important to us, something that might help in our life. Even today, coming to give the workshop, my mind was there, oh, you might get embarrassed. What if nobody shows up? What if someone asks a question that you can't answer, and that'll look really bad for you, kind of thing. And just the mind comes up with reason after reason after reason. So that's, I suppose, one of the ways. It's not that reasons are never valid or never true, but sometimes they are like a barrier or a little prison that stops us doing what matters. Other types of thinking then are kind of rules that we have for ourselves, that can create problems. So I always think back to, I suppose, a rule I picked up somewhere along the way is that, oh no, you shouldn't worry about things. So you start beating yourself up when you're worried about things. But we pick up all sorts of rules, that we shouldn't do this and we shouldn't do that. And they can create a barrier for us, and when we break them, it's painful. It's very painful. But those are some of the thinking patterns that we can get into. That I suppose I would talk about and think about sometimes. Yeah, and I think we're maybe not that aware of them sometimes. Is what the issue is. Yeah.
You just feel that you shouldn't do it, but you don't know why you shouldn't do it.
Yeah.
It just comes up to your mind.
Absolutely. A kind of an example is, I suppose, especially here in this country, one of those little rules as kids that we pick up is, big boys don't cry and things like that. And, we know how rules like that, even for, I suppose, men's mental health growing up, or young men's mental health, that you know, you're not supposed to cry, you're not supposed to show emotions or have emotions kind of thing. But we all take in little rules like this as we go along in our lives, as we grow up. It can, create problems for us, yeah.
And it sums up after a while, and then...
Well, absolutely. And we don't realise that we've picked them up and been it's nearly like been programmed into us, you know. We picked them up before we realise that they're going to be a problem along the way, but it's quite hard then to shed them, which is why then some of the techniques we talk about in the workshop can be helpful in just, I suppose, being able to see that that's a rule there that's not really helping me in my life, and get a bit of space from it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So this evening you explained that the mind will tell you lots of reasons why you should turn away from things that matter to you because of the comfort zone. However, there are also thoughts that are value and you should listen to them. So I wanted to ask, how can you figure out what thoughts are value and which thoughts are holding us back?
Yeah, and it can be, I suppose there's not necessarily hard and fast rules about this, but it is about just, I suppose, being aware, first of all, of the thoughts, and, you know, you kind of also need a bit of awareness of what is actually important to you, you know. So we have, in this series, we'd have had an earlier workshop about values, or what's important to you. So you kind of need to know what that is, and then you need to, you know, honestly sit with yourself and think, is this thought taking me towards that greater connection in my life, or towards that achievement, or challenging myself, whatever it is that, you know, is important and meaningful to you? Or is it going in the other direction? Is it avoiding? Usually the other direction is, or a lot of them, it's avoiding something, you know, and it's avoiding those difficult feelings or that discomfort. And I suppose we talk about it's called the choice point, and that's, you know, it's kind of like a splitting of the two paths, the sort of crossing the road. And one direction is, you know, trying to avoid the pain, the difficult feelings. The other direction, and it might be a bit uncomfortable, is going towards what's important, what's meaningful, you know, what will bring you fulfillment in life. Yeah, and it.
So at first you have to step back, have a look at the thought, and then decide, is it bringing me towards my goal, or like what I really want to have?
Yeah.
And then decide.
Yeah. So like, and it's, you know, as I say, there aren't hard and fast rules. You know, you might have a really difficult thought, like, I'm terrible. Well, a difficult thought, like I'm terrible at interviews, or something like that. And you know, that could go either way. Like that might mean that you go away and avoid it, or you might choose to do something different, and you might choose, well, I'm going to get training, or I'm going to get feedback, you know. So like, sometimes a difficult thought can go in either direction as well. So that's why we talk about, I suppose, thinking about thoughts based on how helpful they are. So rather than whether they're true or not, how helpful they are. And that's I suppose maybe a part of that as well, you know. So, you know, that you know, any difficult thought we could have is true, but it might not lead us in the direction that we want in life. Yeah.
So speaking of thoughts, you also mentioned that one of the aims to achieve is to look at your thoughts rather from them.
Yeah.
So could you explain that in more detail?
Absolutely, of course. I suppose to flesh it out a little bit, when I say I'm looking from my thoughts, it's a bit like the thoughts are, you know, like glasses that you see the world through. They're kind of tinting how you view the world. I suppose so. We instead of thoughts then colouring how we see the world and steering the direction we go in, we want to have that little bit of distance. We want to know or notice that our thoughts are just thoughts. They're not literal truths. They don't have to be followed or obeyed, even though they might seem impossibly convincing sometimes. So through, I suppose, this process called diffusion, we want to create that little bit of distance. We want to basically kind of disentangle ourselves a little bit And to be able, as I say, just to see a thought as a thought, its language, its words, its pictures, when we strip it all back, that's what it is. So that's kind of what we mean by that. We want to see it for what it actually is. And when we look at that, when we see it as just language, just words, pictures, we can see that it's, it doesn't need to shape, it doesn't need to, I suppose, steer the car of our life then, I suppose.
I wanted to ask you also, because this workshop was marked by a lot of experiments and practices for the participants. So can you tell us about the chosen experiments and why you picked them specifically? Because I think there's a wide range of different experiments probably. So why have you specifically picked them?
I suppose I did want to give a nice breadth and flavour of, I suppose, the acceptance and commitment therapy, and I suppose I hoped that by picking this sort of spread as well, that, everyone would be able to engage in some way, towards the end of the workshop we have a mindfulness-based exercise, and some people will find it difficult to partake in that and find it hard to engage, especially because I know a lot of people here this evening, would have been their first time touching that sort of exercise, So if we had 3 exercises like that, some people would really have been limited in how much they got out of tonight. But equally, it can be a really nice exercise for people who can sort of visualize, and I suppose it can be really helpful just to picture thoughts in that way, and to, I suppose, just be able to imagine them, that we can actually sit and observe our thoughts, a bit like watching the leaves on a stream, and that's kind of what that is trying to convey. Our thought, our mind can be just like that river, and the thoughts like the leaves. Another exercise that we did tonight was called taking your mind for a walk, and I think that's a nice one. I suppose just to kind of empower people as much as anything, that during that exercise, that one person will be the person and the other one will be the mind, and that despite the mind being there chattering away and criticizing and judging and doing everything that minds do, you can still do what's important to you despite it. And I suppose I know I've done that and practiced that myself and found that really empowering, that even though all these difficult and anxious thoughts and sad thoughts or whatever it may be are there, I can still do what's really important to me. Like even given the example of coming here today and being really worried and having all sorts of thoughts about how it might go and how it might pan out, I can still have those and come and do something and, be really feeling great after doing it as well. And then we do a third exercise then about just giving reasons, and just to kind of, I suppose it's a nice visual way of seeing how easily our minds do give reasons, because we don't maybe notice it in ourselves so quickly, but when we're actually thinking about Jim or Michael's behaviour, we could come up with so many reasons really surprisingly easily and surprisingly quickly. I think it's just a nice way of actually seeing that in a very tactile and visual way,
Yeah, also the first practice, the first practice with the walking mind was very interesting, because like you mentioned, one of the persons were the mind and the other one was just a person. And the mind is always judging, not always critically, of course, but mostly. There's always the side where it says, okay, do you really want to do this? So when you're doing this exercise, and if you're thinking like further a little bit, how should you as a person maybe respond to the mind? Is there a way? Because should you ignore it, or what would you say to it?
I suppose to pick up the ignoring piece, it's actually it links back to the pink elephant exercise, because basically what you're trying to do there is ignore the elephant or the difficult thought when we bring it back to ourselves. And we know from trying to exercise ourselves and from a lot of research that it's really, really hard to ignore thought, even harder again to push it away or to suppress it. So actually sort of weirdly enough or counterintuitively enough, actually sort of turning towards the thought, acknowledging that it's here. And you can even say things, really simple things like, thanks mind for that thought, or just saying, I'm noticing that thought is here. So like if I was having the thought that, I'm really stupid, even just saying I'm having the thought that I'm really stupid, and just actually admitting it to yourself, just, I suppose, acknowledging it like that can actually have a powerful effect, and just take a little bit of the heat and a bit of discomfort out of it, and just, I suppose, create a little bit of space and distance from it. I know it can feel like a strange thing to do, because you don't want to have the thought, and all of a sudden now you're saying turn towards the thought and face it, like kind of face it a little bit gently. So like it can feel a bit, as I say, counterintuitive, but it actually can be very powerful. And as we've seen in our own research, that it works a hell of a lot better than trying to ignore or suppress or to even argue with the thoughts. So some people will like argue with their thoughts or that, and that doesn't work either. But actually just facing it and just acknowledging that it's here can be really freeing.
So what tips would you give to someone dealing with difficult thoughts?
I suppose there's lots of little quick tips, I suppose. Like the very first one I kind of just mentioned is just putting that little phrase in front of a thought. So if I'm saying I'm stupid, just instead saying I'm having the thought that I'm stupid, just creates a little bit of space. Or I suppose even saying the thought in a silly voice. So I suppose going like, I'm really stupid. Just, I suppose, again, takes a little bit of the heat out of it. It's not that we're trying to make fun of our thoughts or to ridicule our thoughts or to nearly embarrass the mind for having the thought. It's just, I suppose, to strip the thought back a bit again, kind of to what I mentioned earlier about it being just words, it being just language. So yeah, or other things that can help, kind of like link to the saying a silly voice, is if you can do impressions, doing it in a cartoon character's voice or a film character's voice. I'm not blessed with that ability, but even if you're like me, I find even imagining it in Homer Simpson's voice or someone else that you kind of find of humorous and light, just strips away a bit of the sort of pain and the discomfort that can be attached to it. Equally, just saying the thought really, really slowly. So, I'm really stupid. It just again strips back a bit of that hurt that comes along with it, and will hopefully let you see it just as words, language, pictures again. And other things that can be helpful are just thanking your mind for the thought. The mind is doing what has evolved to do over thousands and thousands of years. So just thanking it for it. A bit like if I don't know, a family member or a friend came up with something that wasn't so helpful, just saying thanks and just moving on with it, kind of thing, can be something that's helpful. But those are just kind of a flavour of some things you can do fairly quickly, fairly easily for yourself. Yeah.
Okay, so that's it. Thanks for taking the time talking to me, and yeah.
Thanks so much, and thanks for giving me this opportunity to speak to you.
Thank you, Pia, and thanks to Joe Lavelle. Pia also sampled some of the thoughts of the audience at the talk and what they felt they got from it.
What aspects did you take away from the workshop?
The fact that even though your body is doing things that you think are relaxing you, but your mind the thoughts come along with that, and therefore the act of diffusing, I think, was a really important concept that I realized, and I probably hopefully will be using again to make sure that I detach.
So what aspects did you take away from the workshop?
I found that the mindfulness session he did was really wonderful, and how to visualise putting your problems on the leaves going down the river, and just visualising your problems and putting them to the side and giving yourself time. It was just an amazing little seminar he gave.
What aspects did you take away from the workshop?
And maybe the meditation part, I like that, and I feel very relaxed and and I think it can help me be more concentration on my study. After the meditation, I think that's a good part. Yeah.
The thoughts of some of the attendees at the Feeling Better Projects meeting on March 26th in UCD. As I said, there is an upcoming meeting and talk by the Feeling Better Project. It's on in UCD on the 24th of April, and it's all about procrastination. Are you tired of the 4 a.m. Red Bull-induced writing extravaganzas? Feeling stuck despite your growing workload and the looming end of the academic term? Looking for techniques to reduce your procrastination? Look no further. This interactive workshop will guide UCD students and staff through evidence-based activities to help you get unstuck and pursue personally meaningful goals. Attendees will be introduced to the roots of procrastination according to contextual behavioural science, namely avoidance, fusion, and lack of values clarity. Attendees will also learn how to stop prioritising inefficient goals and instead learn to use their values as a guide. The workshop will be delivered free of charge by psychologists from UCD School of Psychology and promote well-being on campus and reduce the population of procrastination nation. That's April 24th in UCD. Details on Eventbrite for UCD students and staff. You're with 103.2 Dublin City FM. On next week's programme, we'll be talking with Friends of Suicide Loss, and a good interview we will have. Some details about them as a forerunner to next week's programme. Friends of Suicide Loss was initiated in 2015 when a group of people bereaved by suicide in the Dublin area came together to offer each other support. In 2016, they began to work side by side with other suicide groups in facilitating group support meetings in the Dublin city centre for those bereaved by suicide, and in 2017 they expanded their support group services to the greater Dublin communities, along with providing from time to time educational programmes, publications, workshops, presentations, lectures, conferences and pamphlets for the suicide bereaved, appropriate professionals, counsellors and students, communities and agencies involved in support services for those affected by suicide, as well as the general public at large. Friends of Suicide Loss has made the city centre of Dublin its focal point for meetings and a hub to service the surrounding communities and beyond. That's next week on 103.2 Mental Wealth here on Dublin City FM. From myself, Brian Green, and from our production team of Margaret McHugh, Joe McBride and Pia Einecker, thank you for listening, and we'll be back next Tuesday at the same time and on the same channel. Until then, have a great week, stay safe, take care, and goodbye.